Yada, 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 yada. Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney has a bold economic vision for Canada. No more integration with the United States, no further integration. And we're going to have free trade within the provinces, and we're going to do more exporting to Europe and Asia off our coast from our ports like Vancouver or Montreal or on the Atlantic coast. And he wants to do nation building projects like a national power grid. There is an op-ed in today's New York Times that I think it can serve as a blueprint for another nation building project that we haven't thought about yet. We haven't talked about. And this op-ed is by Michael Dunne of Dunne Insights, and he's a former GM executive who spent the last 20 years working in China in the automotive industry. He's a consultant, and he knows the Chinese electric vehicle industry inside and out. You've seen him I've interviewed him here many times. But this op-ed, I think, represents an opportunity for Canada. So I'm going to give you 4 points in the course of this video. So stay tuned to the end. This is important. First of all, I'm going to talk about Dunn's argument that China is essentially it's taking over the global automaking industry. It's going to devastate the industry in Europe, in Japan, in Korea, in the United States. It's already disrupted it in a big way. And BYD is the Chinese champion, but there are plenty of other players in this industry. How China did it. That'll be number two. Number three, Dunn offers a strategy for the United States to go toe to toe with China in essentially copying its model, putting an American spin on it, and saving Detroit before it basically collapses under Chinese competition. I'm going to argue that is never going to happen because of Donald Trump. The US president will continue to protect domestic industries with tariffs, shielding them from competition, and there's no chance that GM and Ford and so on are going to be globally competitive with China. What if Canada took it over? What if Canada said, you know what? We already have a domestic auto industry. We make 1.4 to 1.6 million autos a year. We have 700 plus auto parts manufacturers, most of them in Ontario. We have all the ingredients like critical minerals to do EV battery packs, EV manufacturing, on and on. What if we did what Dunn is going to suggest? So bear with me as I lay out this argument for you. Okay, first of all, BYD has overtaken Tesla as the world's top-selling EV brand. I mean, that's not news to anybody. They caught them last year. Now they're well ahead. But here's what we maybe have not heard is that BYD is going to catch Japan, Toyota, and Germany, VW, to be the world's largest automaker by 2030, according to Dunn. Oh, by the way, this is in the New York Times, Why Americans Can't Buy the World's Best Electric Car, in case you want to check it out. So he argues that, look, I mean, there's no way that North America or Europe, Japan, Korea can compete because the Chinese cars, their EVs, are high quality, high tech, and very much in demand. They meet consumers' needs, and they sell for like $10,000 US in China. And so there's no way that we can compete with them. Here's how they did it, and this is point number two. First of all, they had a vision, they had a strategy. And they hatched this back in about 2007, 2008. I've actually done videos on this before. They've had champions inside the government who said, we want to compete with the US and other countries in autos. We have a big internal combustion engine, gas-powered, automaking sector. It will never match the West. We'll never catch up in terms of technology. We're too far behind. Electric vehicles are right on the horizon, and this is about the time that Tesla was incorporated and began making cars. Electric is where we're going to go. And so they put in place a strategy, and they have a long-term plan. They had heavy, heavy government subsidies, not just at the national level, but at the provincial government level and at the local level. There's a lot of debt, a lot of subsidies that have been provided to these various firms and to support this strategy. Vertical integration, and this is BYD is the classic example. It started out as a battery company, and now it owns every part of the supply chain, including even ships, ocean-going ships, to take its product to market. Rapid innovation. We saw just the last little while, a couple of months ago. CATL came out with a 5-minute charge to get you 400 kilometers. BYD followed, and now they say they can get 5 minutes. In 5 minutes, they can get you 523 kilometers. Essentially, they're very close and will soon surpass the amount of time it takes to refuel a gas-powered car. And at that point in the game, the jig is up, folks. Um, and they've not only that, but they've used this same model, this same industrial strategy model to become dominant in batteries, robotics, drones, all sorts of industries where what they do is they subsidize many startups. And these startups, they expand and they scale up and they have way too much capacity. It doesn't matter. The point is they're competitive. They drive down prices, they increase innovation, they move outside of China into places like, the global south, other parts of Asia, Latin America, Africa, and so on. And they compete vigorously. And so over a period of time, the industry consolidates and you're left with maybe five, six, 10 really competitive Chinese industries or companies that dominate the industry globally. And they're replicating this model in the EV space. And this is why essentially that, Dunne argues, and this is the third point here, is that under Trump and his focus on tariffs and protecting domestic industries from competition, the American Detroit will never catch up. Detroit is cooked in Dunne's view. By 2030, GM and Ford and Stellantis are just going to be a shell of their former self. They're basically ceding dominance of the industry over to China. And so here's what he says. And I guess this is the third part of his argument in the New York Times. What he said is, look, the 100% tariff isn't working that the Americans brought in, and Justin Trudeau in Canada brought in a similar 100% tariff on Chinese EVs in September to match the Americans. So we're just as bad for this and in the same spot. And so they're retreating to a domestic niche. And he said the way to do this is essentially to launch a Manhattan-style project. You remember the project got launched in the 30s to create an atomic bomb during World War II, and the government just threw money at it and resources at it, and eventually, cracked the code, as it were, cracked the uranium atom, and created the atomic bomb and set off the atomic age. And what Dunne is arguing is for something similar to that here. So government-led push, get government out in front of it. I know that's not very, it hasn't been sexy for 45 years to think of government as leading, but that, thanks to industrial strategy coming out of Asia, that pendulum is coming back, and government now is expected to, if you want to play in these spaces, government has to play a major role. And what does Carney say? Carney said exactly the same thing. A little different. It is that government will collaborate with all the other players, whether labor, industry, finance, whatever, all the players that come to the table, but government is play a leadership role, and government will play a facilitating role and will provide capital. It will take risk, all of that stuff. That's what Dunne is advocating the Americans do. They're not going to do it. This is a perfect opportunity for Canada. And, I've interviewed Flavio Volpe, who's head of the Automotive Parts Association, the Canadian manufacturers, the ones with, the 700 plus parts manufacturers. And some of them, like Magna International, are major global international players. And Flavio, over the last 2, 3 years, has led the Project Arrow, where they basically took all of the, Canadian suppliers and they collaborated and they built an electric SUV from the ground up. It's a good-looking vehicle. I'd buy it if it became available. So the point was to prove that the Canadian industry can make an electric vehicle to the quality and the specs, a global level, compete with the Chinese. We've done it. We've proven it. This is our pilot project, our demonstration project. We have the expertise. Now what we need is the vision. We need the strategy. We need basically a national consensus that this is a nation building project, and that we would not only protect what we have, but we would maybe surpass the Americans. We would through our either, maybe we would cooperate with existing American companies like GM and Ford. Maybe we would create a national champion, a new company, or maybe it would be Crown Corporation. Maybe it would be a private corporation with government involvement. Who knows? Those are details we can talk about afterwards. The point here is that the strategy is to create an industry inside Canada that can export and compete with China in the EV market. Can we do it? I think it's worth talking about. And certainly, the Prime Minister has already talked about, hey, look, we think that we can support our domestic manufacturers, and it's really important, not because just that they're making cars in places like Windsor, Ontario, it's the supply chains. Because supply chains for example, an EV include batteries, and critical minerals could come from Alberta, from British Columbia, from mines there. They could come, then you have to make them into battery metals. That could be done in Western Canada. Maybe they ship it out raw to Ontario, and that's where it's turned into battery metals, which then become battery packs, which then go into electric vehicles. Maybe Alberta turns its bitumen into carbon fiber, automotive grade carbon fiber, which then lightweights the electric vehicle and would give Canadian EVs an enormous advantage on the global stage. This is the kind of visionary thinking that's available to us now. It won't be available to us in 2 years or 5 years or 10 years. It's available now if we jump on this. This is an opportunity. And what I'm proposing is that we have a national conversation about this and agree that this is something that Canada ought to undertake. And then, and we've had Dr. Bentley Allen on here talking about industrial policy. That's his area of expertise, and it's about collaboration. Somebody has to lead it. Mark Carney, the government, that's great. Let him lead it. But then you bring the other players and you get a consensus and you get buy-in, and everybody brings something to the table, and you begin working to achieve that strategy. You have a plan, you work the plan. Then you begin building things, building EV plants, building battery plants, building critical mineral extract mines. You build the refining and processing, smelting plants that you need for on and on and on. All of that is doable. It's doable today if we decide that we want to take that extra step and not just protect what we have as part of the North American industry. We want to be bigger than that. We want to have a nation building project. And all of that industrial capacity, and this is a point that Dunne makes, if America loses its automotive industry, it loses more than just a few automaking plants. It loses the supply chains. It loses the brain power. It loses the technical expertise. It loses so much. It loses the capacity to build technology in the event of a military conflict with China. When you get right down to it, that's how important this is. So this is an opportunity for Canada to step up, be visionary, to be leaders, to say, fine, if you won't do it, America, we'll do it. I'm putting this on the table, and hopefully folks will run with it, and maybe we can start a conversation at the national level to see if there's enough interest, to see if our leadership will step up to the plate and take a swing.